you can be part of documenting biodiversity. Now, before I start doing all this and going into my detail, I would like to inform you that world over, globally, documentation by citizens of biodiversity has taken a very, very important role in scientific research. But the success has been very, very limited and also very patchy. The reason being that people are very,
Shashi, can you have a little louder voice, please? A little
yeah,
louder.
yeah. How about this?
Very
Hello.
good. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
So it has been very patchy. In some areas, people have got a lot of success, and in some areas of science, the success has been very limited. So I would be talking on these aspects also, and then how we can change this to a very successful local monitoring and documentation of biodiversity for our Thane region. That would be my focus on today's talk. So, as I said last time, we need to. I'm just recalling what biodiversity is all about. It's not just the living organism and the variability that they show in all ecosystems, but is also the complex ecosystem and the interactions that are involved in this species to species interactions, species to ecosystem interaction, which keeps all these living forms in their living state and they're maintaining and sustaining their lifestyle. So all these aspects do get involved in biodiversity. So biodiversity is not just about the living things, it is also their living, it is also their interaction with other species, and it is also their interaction with the other ecosystem factors which are there in any of the habitat where they live. So as we just to recall again, we all know this, that we have about 25 mega diversity hotspots in the of the world in India. Now when I recall saying that when I say hotspot, it is not because we have lots of biodiversity. The hotspot in a biodiversity terminology would mean that they are more threatened. So to have minimum number of biodiversity hotspots should be our aim in our future conservation goals. So we occupy only about 2.5% of the land area, but we have about 8% of the globally recorded species in this small land area. So this is another very important thing which we need to understand. Uh, The other major aspect that gets involved in biodiversity is the traditional and indigenous knowledge. The traditional knowledge that our people carry, traditional knowledge that the ecosystem people, as Dr. Madhav Gadgil has given a very beautiful word to people living near forests and ecosystem, very important ecosystem, as ecosystem people, because they have been living in that ecosystem, they have been interacting with the ecosystem for ages, and they know how to live in coordination with the changes in the ecosystem. So they are the people who know much about that ecosystem. They are the people who know what are the changes that has occurred over the years over the ecosystem, and these are things that need also to be documented, and they get also integrated in the definition of biodiversity. So that's why I put it separately as a point. Now, India is signatory to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, since we have signed it, we have a commitment that we would do conservation of biodiversity. We would do strategies to sustain this biodiversity over the next few years and generations. So, this is our commitment. It's an international commitment of a government. So, therefore, it culminated in this Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Now, what it encompasses is that the grassroots people would also be involved in conservation, and they would be sustainably using the biological resources as this is associated with their knowledge, and they will share the benefits flowing from the biological resource and associated knowledge. So that's why under Biological Diversity Act, if we are going to make some important economical gain through a traditional knowledge, let's say a medicinal plant in a certain forest, and we develop some formulations from that medicinal plant. By the rules of this particular act, the proceeds of the economic benefits that we received by making this formulation has to go back to those people who are living in that ecosystem, and it has to flow back to the sustenance of that ecosystem. So this is one very important aspect of this Biological Diversity Act. And for that, documentation is important, because anything which is economical value, it doesn't have any standard status in a court of law unless it is documented properly. And that's very important. And that's why documenting biological diversity has become such an important factor in today's global economics. Now, we have a huge cultural diversity, which I need not explain. There are a lot of tribal groups, and all these tribal groups, nomads and villagers, they have varying degrees of traditional knowledge. Very minor, very simple, sometimes very, very significantly effective. So these knowledges are passed. There is no written script on it, but they are passed from one generation to the other. And that's what need to be documented in an officially uh, retrievable manner. And that's what biological documentation or biodiversity documentation is all about. Now, biodiversity today is considered as an important national wealth, and once it has been coming in the definition of a national wealth, then obviously it needs to be documented to its accurate grassroots levels. And therefore, the first step is to document it, and then of course conserve it and utilize it sustainably, so that it remains sustained for posterity. That's the main goal of all this biodiversity. Unless otherwise, there is no sense in respecting it as a national wealth. Now we know that it's not happening today. We are losing our biodiversity day by day due to human pressure, due to socio-economic pressure, over exploitation, obviously developmental activities. Now, how do we use this information technology that we have today, a very advanced tool that we have in our hand, for the benefit of documenting the biodiversity, which indirectly will help greatly in conserving them and strategizing their sustainable utilization? So this is very important, that documentation becomes the foundation for all further conservation and sustainable development to take place in such ecosystems. Sustainable utilization of those resources will all flow out of the documentation that has to happen. Now, why are we talking about this today then? This documentation is not very simple. It cannot be done just by the scientific community. It is impossible to be done by the scientific community. Let me put it in very straight manner. Therefore, the scientific community needs a supplement force in terms of the citizens' help to document. And that's where citizens come in biodiversity documentation. So now we'll go further. Now, what does this documentation, even if you do, what does it, entail to? It entails complete ecological well-being of all our biodiversity resources, including land, water in all forms. So it not only covers natural forest habitat, but also farmlands, irrigation tanks. It will also cover overgrazed pastures. Please remember, that is also biodiversity. It must have been exploited. It could have been exploited due to mining. It could have been exploited due to overgrazing, but they need to be documented. So overgrazed pastures, eroded hill slopes, rivers, seas, and all traditional varieties of domesticated species, which are cultivated species of plants, domesticated varieties of animals, breeds, all those need to be documented today, because what we have lost in some of them is our original cultivars or breeds of livestock. We have lost. We really don't know now. So what is remaining today needs to be therefore documented well and officially retrieval manner. And then most importantly, as I said earlier, traditional knowledge and uses of the biodiversity, that also needs to be documented. Now, what does it ensure? All this documentation will ensure that the benefits flowing from this natural heritage will go back to the people at the grassroots. So it is win-win situation for everybody, and it will not only benefit us and our next generations, but will also continue to benefit all those people who would be then responsible to take care of these ecosystems and the biodiversity well. Now, the question that was there in everybody's mind is, when we talk about biodiversity, what is the number of species living on this planet? I mean, there are huge numbers being floated around, but for a change, I was very impressed with this particular paper, which was published in 1988 by May. He did a very simple calculation. He related the length of the body and the number of species present. So he took out all these relationship of all the species that is known today, and then he assumed that if the size of the species is large, I mean a big, then they are obviously observed and obviously recorded. So we already know about those species. So assuming that large size species are already almost completely known, he calculated and he gave an estimate about 50 million species should be there on this planet. But this number is changing, because the tenet, the foundation tenet that this May used was size and the number, species number. But the specific relation between body size and the species lifestyle is not very clear even today. And even today, we have some primates being rediscovered. There are some big lizards that have been discovered for the first time. So even larger size species are getting discovered even today. So May's assumption that all large size species would have been studied is again not fully correct. So therefore, even this estimate is very underestimate. This is what people have been saying, which obviously could be true. So we could be looking at around 100 million species on this planet. So the reason is that there is an large amount of information that we still don't know. So, and we really don't know how the species use the habitat, and therefore habitat conservation is very important, because the major factor that has been reducing the biodiversity has been the habitat loss. So therefore conservation of habitat becomes very important. But then, do we have complete knowledge of how species use an ecosystem and how an ecosystem influences the survival of a species and its progeny? We still don't know. So how a species completely uses an ecosystem and resources, which is changing over seasons, changing over years, and still the species is able to sustain. So how is it managing? We still are not very clear. Then at the same time, if we were to save the habitat and the species together, it would also help save the humanity as a whole and at the planet as a whole. So this equally is very important. So therefore, we need to target the habitat. We also need to target the species documentation along with it. So finally, what we would say is that if you conserve the ecosystem in a good manner, then definitely the species obviously would survive. So today, the biodiversity conservation efforts are more targeted to ecosystem management and habitat conservation for this reason. Okay. Now, when you look at ecosystems and try to look at strategies of management, it has another very important benefit. The benefit is that when you are looking at managing an ecosystem, the ecosystem resources are also sustainably made available to whichever species that are living in that ecosystem. Now that becomes a very long range strategy of biodiversity conservation. And that's why world over, scientists are talking about ecosystem preservation, habitat protection, habitat management, so that biodiversity, the living biodiversity, gets automatically conserved and sustained over a long period of time. Now, coming to the citizen's role. Now, when you talk about citizen science, we are talking about involvement of normal people. When I say normal people, I just want to separate them from the scientists. or so we need the general public to get involved in monitoring ecosystems, biodiversity on a voluntary basis, and sometimes they can be actively involved. So when you look at citizen science, three important words are very important. That is, one is involvement of people in monitoring. They should be available, or they should be participating in a voluntary capacity. There could be also a participatory monitoring, by which they will collaborate with scientists. So participatory monitoring along with scientists, I'll come to that later. But all these kind of activities will fall under the definition of citizen science. So it's basically general public voluntarily doing a scientific work. Okay. Now there are different ways of the citizen science happening. One is called as the contributory approach. Now in contributory approach, the citizens are just working as data collectors. Like it could be a simple listing of birds that you saw in your backyard. It could be listing of trees in your locality, and then submitting a list to the authorities. But there has to be always a central agency, a central platform that would collate all this information. That obviously is taken for granted, and I am not going to detail of that, but it is always there, and it is to this central platform or central agency or that group that the citizens are giving this information. So if they are in the contributory approach method, then they are just giving them data. So they are just data collectors. The collaborative or co-created approach is that they are not only collecting data, but they are also involved in the planning of the scientific process. So like it would be very simple, like identifying the question of interest. For example, let's look at the Vihar Lake and Tulsi Lake, and citizens want to support how to conserve the catchment area of Tulsi. So what kind of activities should be done? So then citizens come together and they decide, okay, how plantation has to be done, how land this landscaping needs to be done. So here the citizens would sit along with the scientists to plan and then implement this collection of data. So they will also design methodology. So they, because the scientists would not be able to see, scientists would be able to do rigorous methodologies, but citizens may not be able to. So many times the rigorous methodologies that we use in our lab needs to be simplified and then implemented in the field with the citizens' help. Now that kind of designing needs contribution from the citizen themselves. Then of course in analyzing data, this also can come because citizens, many of them can have an IT knowledge, and they need not have the scientific background, but IT knowledge is very good, so they can be of very good help in analyzing the data. So this is a contributory approach from the citizens, what is called as the co-creation approach or collaboration approach. And then of course the most important thing that comes as a benefit, and when citizens get involved, is when the citizens themselves are using the results and getting benefit out of it. Now I'll give you my own personal experience. I had taken up a biodiversity survey and documentation of the Vadhavan shore, which is near Dahanu. Now that was because the Vadhavan was going to be declared as a food. Now that project is again getting revived by the government, so we are again trying to stop it. And the locals were so much involved in this work that I was doing that I used to get a lot of support from them. Many of them also used to come and give me this information. Oh, I saw this, this was there, you are looking for this, now it is there in that shore at this place. So I was getting a lot of information from the local fishermen. Now there the contribution came so much to me because they were also getting used, they were also getting useful data from me, which for them was going to save their livelihood. So if the citizens are involved and they are able to use the results of the citizen science, then it becomes very, very effective. Now, the third one is a higher level of what I just explained. It's called participatory monitoring. Now, this happens when there is a significant need of the local citizen themselves about conserving the biodiversity. They understand that there is a problem in their area and conservation is the only solution, then they would become a participatory monitoring participants, that they would not only be involved in collecting data and designing the survey or data collection and documentation, but they would also be actual ones who would design, also find out what questions to be answered and what solutions to be made. So it would be like rather than the scientist telling, oh, this to be done, the citizens come up saying that, oh, this is what we want to do and we will do it, you guide us. So they become a very important role and they become an important figure in the entire documentation part. So here what happens, most of the participatory citizen science activities become very successful, like many of the wildlife reserve, people participation and management becomes very successful. That's because there is a local need, and that no need makes them more participatory and more involved in the entire work. So that's the participatory monitoring. So there are three different specific ways in which citizens can get involved in biodiversity documentation. Now, the effectiveness of the documentation, as I said, one thing is that if there is a local need, the effectiveness would be better. Similarly, if there is a local need, then there would be a regional, requirement that would be automatically fulfilled. And when the regional requirement is fulfilled, a national requirement gets fulfilled. And when the national requirement gets fulfilled, is a global requirement getting fulfilled. So if there is a local need, its effects is not just regional, it is even global. Now let's see how it is. Like for example, if there is a local need of management and policy impacts, that we decide, okay, there is a problem, water is scarce, our wells are getting dried up, so we need to do water table management, we need to do some landscaping, we need to do some tree plantation, we need to bring in some greenery to this area, and the citizens start doing it. Now that local thing, it is because of a local need, that would lead to a large community activity, and there would be an ownership to that problem, ownership to that entire project. And then the locals get help from international agreements and documents and announcements that have come, policies that the government has signed, they will come. For example, Ramsar site, if locals are declaring that, oh, we want to keep this wetland because it is feeding our wells, it is feeding our fields, so let's save this. And then if they save and try to get a Ramsar site identification for that place, even the locals will get benefit, governments will be forced to give benefits to the local. So this is how a local thing, starting with a local need, can have a global ramification. So the international drivers are very important because it will give a more impact, whereas local drivers are very important because the success based on the local needs. So both these aspects are very important for citizen science. Now, if you look very interestingly, some people are asking me, why should there be citizen science? What is the great importance about it, and can they really do it? Because many times, moment you say science, scientific documentation, scientific observation, citizens generally go behind. General public don't really withdraw. Now, that need not be the case. For example, here what I am trying to show you is that all the different types of international conventions and pacts and agreements that are generally signed for biodiversity between different countries, including United Nations and various countries. So there are lots of them, like this UNCED is there, CMS is there, CITES is there, OECD is there, Ramsar site is there. All this if you take, and the bracket are the number of parameters that can be contributed by citizens by their documentation. So if you take all these things into account, 63% of the indicators of 12 agreements can be completed by citizen science. So it is a huge amount of scope that citizen science have today due to all these international agreements, and scientists alone cannot do it. First and foremost, they don't have that resources. Second, they don't have the human power, manpower. So citizen science is the biggest force and manpower that the scientists can get to complete this. And it is not small amount. It is majority of the points, parameters that are required to be fulfilled by these agreements can be completed by citizen sign activities. So there is a big scope, and globally this has been understood and recognized. So there is no need to have a feeling of, a lesser value, that citizens cannot work as scientists. Yes, they cannot do higher end scientific work, but with guidance, they can get documents, they can get documentation properly in a scientific, systematic manner. So this is what I was trying to tell you. Now, based on this, there has been a study on various parts of the globe where there are observer deficits, in the sense where there is deficiency of getting observations about biodiversity. So what people have done is that they have tried to look at the population size, they have tried to look at the biodiversity existing in that place, and then looking at the potential of observation of those people, looking at their educational index, the literacy rate, their income, and their livelihood means. Looking at all that, you can calculate the observation potential of a country, the population in a country, and then also look at the records that the country is contributing to the biodiversity information facility. That is a global biodiversity information facility. Most of you who are bird watchers are part of eBird. The data that is collected through eBird gets recorded here. Now, what is unfortunate is that, if you look at the global biodiversity information facility, majority of the records are coming from eBird platform. There are one or two other platforms which equally give, and maximum number of observations and records are due to birds. Very few with the other conservation status. Now that's very bad, because people have been, in other words, ornithologists or birding people who are doing birding as a hobby are more active in giving data about birds, and they are doing it systematically. So this proves that citizen science is successful. And if there is an involvement of the citizen in the right manner, the data coming is exceptionally useful and it is of good quality. And therefore, they can be documented in the global biodiversity information. What we need to do is to spread this, expand this to other species also. So if you do all these analysis, what has been found is that India has a big observer deficit index. Now that black means these are the areas where there is severe observation deficit. That means citizen science can very greatly improve this deficiency, and observations can be made and contributed to this international forum. Now, what they have also found is that with the expanding economy that India is showing, there is a higher observation potential because people are getting money in their hand. The middle income group is increasing, and the lower income group is shifting to middle income group. Now, why income is very important is that the citizen may need sometimes small equipment like binoculars, simple notes, books, writing material. Whether that population, that observer has that capacity to buy those things and do it, even that gets counted. Otherwise, that observer's observation is not very efficiently put forward into the group. So when you are saying that internet use IT facility, that observer whom I am targeting also must have that income, must have the knowledge, must have the computer technology, and come in with the information. So if you look at that, India has a huge potential. It's not that we don't have that potential, but we are underutilizing our potential. So when I talk about biodiversity documentation, many of my friends tell me, oh, there are a lot of other platforms which are doing it. They are doing it, but it is absolutely inefficient. It is not at all meeting the needs of the global biodiversity documentation that is envisaged by the UN. What we need is much more efficient systems, more broader species involvement, and better scientific guidance to all these, and better outputs coming out from these platforms. That's very important. So when I talk about biodiversity, people talk about eBird. Fine, eBird is good, but it is talking only of one species, which is not sufficient for biodiversity documentation. Okay, I think I made my point very clear that the why biodiversity documentation is so important and what is so important about the citizens' contribution to it. So what we are doing is the documentation of biodiversity in form of people's biodiversity register. This is a very big buzzword. People are all talking. There are a lot of groups which are working on it. Government is giving funds to a lot of groups, but whether it is going to the right group and whether the funds are being utilized, that's a very different question. India is still very bad in people's biodiversity register. Let me put it in very plain words. So what do we do then? What does this people's biodiversity register talk about? It is a valuable information of biodiversity resides with the people and grassroots. That means whatever information that people have at grassroots in form of knowledge, no, information, experience, and usage, all these should get documented. So we have to involve the local people, the local panchayats. That means the government bodies has to be completely involved. So it not only records biodiversity resources, it also records traditional knowledge, it also records the folk knowledge. Now, what is very important is we need to interact with the people. For documentation to be effective, we also have to interact with the local people, find out what is their opinion about changes in that ecosystem over the years. So, age old people, very senior people in the population need to be interviewed, find out what was the situation during their childhood, what changes have they perceived. Now, these are very, very important documents that are missing in our biodiversity registers. So that kind of information has to come in. So this we can also relate it with how the livelihood patterns have changed. So therefore, what are the threats to the livelihood of people with the changes in the biodiversity? So we need to get their views on who are going to gain with these changes, who are going to be the losers of this change. So all these need to be documented, and how natural resources need to be sustainably utilized. What are people's views? What are the local people who live there understand about their sustainability and usage? Now that also should get documented in the people biodiversity register. So people biodiversity register is not just a list of species and number. It is much bigger than what we are envisaging. I hope you understand the expanse of the work that involves when we talk about a biodiversity register. Now I'm giving you two examples of biodiversity register. Now this is a biodiversity documentation exercise that was undertaken in Uttar Pradesh. I got hold of this document so I can share some of this information. Now, this is a place very close to Noida, about 20 kilometers from there. And a college in that area decided to do a biodiversity register exercise and publish it as a document. Now, let's see how they did it. Now, we can look at the objectives. One objective, obviously, is to document the wild and cultivated flora and fauna of the region. We also need to identify the land use pattern and the land use current practices that are being used there for agriculture, urbanization, wetlands, and wasteland. We also need to study the climate change variability during the last 50 years. So this need to be data that is acquired through local resources, local government agencies, newspaper agencies, and also the local people after interviewing. Then what is the status of the water table? How many of them are using hand pumps, the strong electrical pumps and subsurface water pumps and so on. So that need to be looked at, and what depth are they getting the water with each of these instruments. Then the traditional knowledge of the people, and how the traditional knowledge helps in managing domestic animals, their diseases, even human diseases. Even those documents are very, very important. And folk knowledge, folk culture, folk art, folk traditions, rituals, all that needs to be documented. And then this college thought of organizing a biodiversity mela, so that people could be made aware of their own rich heritage that they are having, in terms of knowledge and also the biodiversity. So this is what they started with as the objective. And then finally, they decided to bring out an illustrated document about this biodiversity register. So now, how did they do it? They first took this village panchayat. It's a small village panchayat that they took up for making this biodiversity register, the Chitera Panchayat. So the area is about 770 hectares with a population of about 6,500 people, of which a good number is in SC category, a major percentage is in OBC, and rest are in non-reserve. Now this gives you a rough idea of the social status of that village, and it's a basic agriculture economy of that panchayat, and mainly winter crops, that means rabi crops, wheat and paddy. They don't have any vegetables or horticulture, and fallow land, whenever the fields are not cultivated, some of them grow bajra or millets and so on, and there is no vegetables or horticulture being grown. So it's a very small village, uh, doing a very not a big sizable economic activity. So they picked up that particular village, and then these are the positioning details of that panchayat. So now what they did was they first got the map of that place, and they started collecting the data. Now how did they do the baseline data? The teachers and students of the college, local college and schools, they recruited, and they were the ones who went around and collected data. They had a brief training on biodiversity and importance, and then they were told to collect the data in a specific manner, and then a standard performer was used for all these collection of data. A map of the panchayat was given with GPF coordinates, and then a topography map was collected, and a satellite imagery of that map. Now these are all important for doing the biodiversity register. That was collected because these are now available from the government agencies if you give your reasons for why you are asking for these maps. And then we use the college used a GIS software on which this data was put in, and the analysis was done by the experts. Now what people did, citizens did, what actual ground truthing. Whatever was recorded, whatever was available in government record is one thing. Are they even still available? Are the records really talking about the reflect or reflecting the truth what is there in the ground? Now this kind of ground truthing was done by the surveys taken over by the students, people, and other citizens and teachers of the college and the locality nearby. So what they did was they divided the map into grids, and each grid was given a GPS information, and using that information people started going around and doing the sampling. The remote sensed images were also obtained, so not a very high resolution that they used. So I'm trying to tell you all these things because these are all possible, not that some very high big scientific data has been collected. They have been all done with available resources which are easily accessible for a citizen. Now they also did mixed phenological formations, gregarious species, every kind of data about the species, their land use pattern, their distribution, and again the resource utilization in terms of how the resources are distributed, what people, what kind of status of people are using it, and then of course even to the drainage map, what is the slope, how the water tables are changing, all those got registered in their survey. Now the remote sensing data is available from this biodiversity characterization, and they can be easily got from the NRSC, and you can get, some of them are available in their publication itself, and you can get them. Now this is the satellite imagery of that place that they got in and used for their survey, and this is the other satellite imagery with false color picture enhanced, so that you come to know where is water, where is plant, and so on. In fact, if you zoom in, you can even try to get some fields and also try to find out which crop is grown. So that kind of data also can be obtained, and then you make a grid from this, which can be done on a GPS, I mean GIS software, and the gridding can be done, and then each grid can be allotted for the survey. So this is generally what they did. Now they also did a demographic survey for the biodiversity recording. So total population, household, and so on, including their income and employment, and how employment and relative standards, symbols like owner of a radio, owner of a TV, owner of a two-wheeler, four-wheeler. So that gives you the social status also. Even those were recorded, and what kind of agricultural crop they are producing, and what kind of waste they produce, ponds, lakes, agroforestry practices, pesticides and fertilizers that are being used, flora and fauna. Of course, the survey was done using a standard format in which the species, scientific name, and all those could be recorded. And so this is becomes a very scientific data. If the citizens are unable to identify scientific names, they can take photographs, take images, write down the local names, and then go there again and check for the authenticity. So these can be done by the citizens. And then they got this grid numbers and GPS numbers. They recorded all these topographical aspect of the place, the tree density, visual evidence of disturbance, like if there any construction, road building, how much was the disturbed area, all that got documented in that survey of that period, during that period. Then cultivated plants, wild plants, seed, domestic animals with their number, variety, yield, milk what they are getting, fur that they are getting, hide that they are getting, all those get recorded. Wild animals that are seen, all common species, everything gets covered. And then traditional knowledge by personal interviews and discussion, what kind of home remedies they use, customs they use, festivals, even talk to hakims and vaidyas and other local practitioners to find out what kind of medicine they use. Even local artisans, elders, and their knowledge all gets documented here. Then folk knowledge with personal interviews, their music, their type of dance forms, and their folk tales and stories that they talk to the children. Land use cover maps that was properly recorded, and also they were ground truth. That means locally look at the map, and then also go check with surveys whether at the local site also is the same thing. And then of course agriculture and urbanization factors, and then climate change, that talk to the people and find out over the last 50 years how the climate has changed, rainfall has increased, which year they had heavy rainfall, which generally which period, and then compare it with the local records of the rain and check out whether it is matching, not matching. If it is not matching, was it a local phenomenon? All those things need to be recorded. And then of course the hydrology details. Now all these gets covered in the biodiversity register. So this is a very major thing that was done by this college for that particular panchayat. Now similar thing, if you look at Kerala I am picking up because that's the only state which has covered all documentation for the entire state. So the people biodiversity register for almost all local bodies are over. Now Wayanad people biodiversity register. Wayanad is a very significant biodiversity rich area, and they completed that register in October 2014. It was done by the local people with the local panchayat, and the panchayat have formed a biodiversity register committee, and this committee has the responsibility of not only checking the data and also reviewing the data, adding the data in the coming years. So even that work is continuously sustained. So then it becomes a local action, local program with the involvement of people. Now that is what biodiversity register is all about. It's not just once you make a document and that's it. It needs to be continuously maintained and upgraded with the local people. Now you can see what the register lists. It's a huge list of everything that they have in their locality. Now all biodiversity registers are with the same kind of data for the entire state. So many panchayats have completed this, and Kerala is one state which has completed almost everything. Now rare species, whatever they have found, they photographed it and put it in the register to show that importance of that place. Now traditional uses of all biodiversity of that place, traditional knowledge of these uses are also recorded in that register, and the local bodies have taken up. Now, India has completed more than 5,000 people's biodiversity registers. Now, it's not a small number, but it is not very adequate with the kind of land that we have and with the kind of biodiversity richness that we have. This is very, very inadequate. So there is lot of work that needs to be done. So that's one point that I wanted to make. Now here is another biodiversity register, which is a very simple documentation of bird count. Madam spoke about bird count that Hope has been doing for last 6 years. Now here is a good example of how bird counts can come out as very good biodiversity registers. Now this is a lake, one single lake that has been surveyed by these youngsters, citizen. They are not scientists. They are simple bird watchers, but they did it effectively over a continuous period over 2 to 3 years, and they published this document. Now what they did was they did this between 2014 and 2016. They see, I'm giving you all details so that to tell you that it is possible. It's not that it is not feasible, I don't have time, that doesn't come. You need to make time, and it is possible to make time. Now here is that they did this survey once a month, usually on second Saturdays. This is what the survey day, and on survey day all documentations were excellently done. So they walked about 2 kilometers in the morning in that lake. This is their transact. So this 2 kilometers is what they walked, and they got all the records. So the 2 kilometer is their signature spot, signature area, which is relative to the entire lake. So whatever is happening in this 2 kilometer, we can assume that it is happening in the lake also. Now they use simple binoculars, a spotting scope, and cameras were used wherever necessary, and then field guides. These were all, or most of us who are birding also have all these equipment. Spotting scope may not be there, so it can be purchased in a group. So this is what is they use. Now the number of observers, see, they minimum was 3, maximum was 8, which is also a possible number that any citizen group can also get. Now this is the type of data they got right from May 2014 to April 2016. They have given the entire number of bird species that had come to that 2 kilometer stretch, and along with that they have also given the rough idea of how much was the water in the lake. Like it was very low, it was dry, it was full, it was medium. So with the changes in the lake level, water levels, how did the species change? This also can be roughly made out. Now interestingly, they have published this in Threatened Taxa, which is an international journal. That journal has accepted their data, and what they have additionally done is they have given this chart of appearance of birds, specific species. I've given you very short list of some very important species there to only tell you the picture of what their survey is. Like these are the ducks and geese. Now they have written which month they appeared until which months they were present. Now that graph is very interesting. Like this is for the northern shoveler, this is for the northern pintail. Most of both of them come nearly at the same time, except that the shoveler comes somewhere in October. This could be a stray population that must be coming there and resting and going away. So that could be one of the reason. Northern pintails are there. Common teals, you can see they are coming in between. They are only there in certain season. So this particular block that you can see here in October could be a visiting migrant. They could be just staying for some time and then moving away. So they could be doing that during the return migration or doing the ongoing migration. So this is the common green shank, then the common sandpiper, the green sandpiper, the marsh sandpiper. See the difference. So by just recording this, it's so very interesting information is available for that small lake in Coimbatore, and these boys have done it. And this is the glossy ibis, which tells you that they are almost there, complete from March to September. They are not there. So obviously in the winter months they are there totally. Now, this kind of information can be easily obtained for some of the lakes that we visit, some of the forests that we visit for birding. Now, that's what is important. for scientific documentation of biodiversity. Counting of bird is not sufficient. It has to bring out some kind of evaluation, and that can be done if the counting is done in a systematic manner. Now this is Vada area. I'm deliberately coming to this point. And Vada I am mentioning because Hope has been working in Vada for a long period of time. We have got close association with Vada because a lot of work related to ecosystem management has been done at that place. Vada is a very place close to Mumbai. Uh, my question to you all today and to Hope itself is that why not take up Vada as a Hope initiative for People's Biodiversity Register? Now I'm giving you a very small project for this. Vada is very nicely surrounded by the Pinjal River on one side, then the Vaitarna River on the other side. You have the Bombay Bhiwandi Vada road going from one end, and once it reaches Vada, from Vada it goes further as Vada Malvada road. Now, if we were to consider the Pinjal River as a boundary, Vaitarna River as the other boundary, and this Vada Malvada road as another boundary, can we not use that area bounded by these three things as our study area for people biodiversity register? This is very easily feasible, and members of Hopes can go there, do the survey, record exactly what I had given to you in the earlier two examples, and come out with a very beautiful illustrated booklet about Vada, because there are a lot of rural people, there are ecosystem people living there, tribals living there, and we can identify very good, rich biodiversity knowledge which are lying with these people, and that can be documented. So this is my sincere suggestion from what Hope can do towards the People's Biodiversity Register. Now, people ask this question: how good is citizens' effort in biodiversity registry? Now, that also has been studied by people. In fact, one of the most efficient biodiversity monitoring has been the Tuscan bird count, which is still going on. One of the most acclaimed citizens' effort in bird counting and bird recording is the Tuscan bird count. Now, what they found out is that even they have problem, and they have found out some solutions. That's what I'm going to list here. We can learn from them. Like, each citizen has a different ability of identifying and detecting birds. Now I'm using both the words, identifying and detecting. You know, unless you are a very good bird watcher and with lot of experience, you may not be able even to detect some species. Whereas even after detecting, it may not, you may not be able to identify that bird. So those kind of variations do remain between citizens, and that has not affected Tuscan bird count. Please remember this. So there is a difference in the type of data that citizens give. There could be variation in the quality, but that is accepted. That's what I want to tell you. So there is difference in the survey design, how some of the citizens will survey. Some will survey very, 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 very focused and very involved. Others may be little light. So that's fine, fair enough, these are happening. So that happens that the pattern of distribution abundance becomes slightly skewed sometimes. Now these changes, these differences do occur, and that can be accounted for in the final analysis. That's the job of the scientists, that's the job of the people who are analyzing the data to do. The second is this, that many times certain sites that need to be surveyed don't get surveyed because it's far away from my home, I cannot go there. Oh, it's very dangerous, there is no light, you need to go in the evening. As a lady, I may not be able to go there. So such kind of things can happen, and some of those areas may not get monitored. So, and some people, in that enthusiasm of a citizen, oh, my count should be good, I should get maximum number of species recorded, so I will try to go to places very close to Yevur. I will not go to the center Naupada area of Thane. There won't be much birds to see. Now, so therefore Naupada gets very least in the priority list of a citizen science. Fine, that does happen. So So these kind of mistakes, or rather I would put mistakes in inverted comma, this is behavioral problems which are part and parcel of the system of scientific surveys by citizens. So what we need to do is we need to work more closely with the local residents of that place. So those, these areas can get, or what we can do is, like in the sparrow count, we had a core group. So because when we were doing the counts, we realized that some of those roads are not getting counted because people are not going there. So we send our volunteers, okay, tomorrow you go there, we want at least one or two counts there. So such core groups can be formed. They will do that compensatory counting, monitoring, which are missed by the citizen science. So this even Tuscan bird count, even after so many years of continuous bird counts at international standards, they are also facing. So it's not that citizen science is without problem, but those problems can be addressed. Now, when you do long term monitoring, there are issues like sometimes suddenly after 2 years that area near the lake may go in for development, or suddenly a road may come close to it, so the entire bird population will change. So such things will definitely happen. So therefore observation and counting, monitoring also will get a difference, and birds may be lost. So such kind of change, sometimes just fencing will change the route that the birders have to take for counting. Your transact would get a fence, so then you cannot cross. So then the transact has to be changed. So such changes do occur, but that can be always addressed. So what we need to do is we need to look at important areas which would not get affected by development in the long run. So such areas should definitely be monitored effectively. And then there are fringe areas where development can come, maybe not today, maybe in 5 years time. In such areas the monitoring can be less effective, but it could be done. It should be continued to be done. So such kind of changes in the strategy is very important to overcome such problems. Expanding urban boundaries, it's another problem in most of the biodiversity areas. We will also face the same thing when we start doing biodiversity monitoring. So we need to look at that, how can these expanding biodiversity, I mean urban areas, affect the biodiversity. So that doesn't mean that biodiversity register should only be in natural forests and sanctuaries and national park. No, it has to cover cities also. It also has to cover urban areas, and such areas will definitely get changed over years, and that needs to be recorded. Now all these results are very invaluable because that helps us to identify which are the key areas that needs ecological management tools to be implemented. Because out of these biodiversity registers we can find out the most sensitive areas which needs immediate action, which needs action in the next coming years, which needs action in the planning stage. So these are the important decisions that can come out and help the decision makers to look at sustaining biodiversity, sustaining natural resources for a more longer period than that can happen today with all the problems. So that's for these results from these biodiversity registers are very, very, very important and very crucial. Please remember, biodiversity is not just life, it is our life. So therefore, we must always do something for this their documentation. So the biodiversity register is important. So what can Hope do? My point is we can provide a scientifically sound, systematic platform. So Hope Nature Trust is now is actually looking for a website where you all can come together, you all can connect and give data. So as soon as the website is ready and launched, we will inform, and you can all put in your observations and be contributors, because Hope will take the responsibility of the data and its evaluation and dissemination of the knowledge coming out of it. Then we can give periodic review and dissemination of this data to citizens in form of leaflets, newsletters, magazine articles, and so on. And even give the information to local authorities so that conservation measures can be done. We can even publish the data, like what I showed you as that Coimbatore lake survey has been published. Even Tuscan Bird Count publishes articles quite often. You can search the net and you will get some publications from them. Now, what are the areas to be covered? These are my suggestion. I'm just giving it to start a discussion. As Madam said, now the next series of lectures would be on biodiversity recording for different species, different animal groups, and so on. So you can consider these things and look at those techniques that they are being suggested for use for those species and animal groups. One is, can you initially look at the flora and fauna in Thane region which are endangered? Like for example, one of the good example would be the glory lily, Gloriosa superba, which is endangered in the Western Ghats. So can we look at how many plants are there in your area, in the Thane region, and in the monsoon, that's the time when these plants come out. Can you record and put a GPS tag for that particular place? So next year we can check up whether that plant is still there at that place or not. Then count and distribution of silk cotton. Now this is in the urban biodiversity area. Like take a distribution and count for silk cotton, Palash, glory lily, Arjun within the Thane city. Now that's, these are important trees. Many of you can add many other species, and I just gave you a list with some idea in my head. Then look at beehives, both of Apis dorsata and Apis mellifera. Uh, can you record with GPS and find out how do they migrate, how the hives get, abandoned and new hives are formed and so on. So we can actually track the activity pattern of bees in Thane region. Then roosts of bats, similarly you can do that. For roosts of bats, some are very age old roosts, some are new, so these things can happen. Similarly for hernaries and community bird roosts, these can be another. Which are the trees where you find community use of birds, which seasons they get used, which species are using it, all those things can be very nicely documented for Thane region, and this can be very nicely given by just simple data and GPS record. Nothing else is needed for all these things. That's why giving you simple. Then count of crow nests with GPS uploads. So if I take a count in this just before monsoon this year, next year again take a count, I will come to know how the crows are changing the nest areas, whether the same area is being used by the same crow pairs year after year. These kind of data gets authenticated by this kind of citizen science movement. Count of sparrow, again we are now trying to change the sparrow count using GPS, so that you can do a sparrow count in your own locality at the given time and date, so that everybody can upload with GPS coordinates, where did you see the sparrow and which species, how much number, and that we can collate to the sparrow count of the Thane city. This is the kind of idea we have. We still need to crystallize it. Most important thing is to first form a website, so that by IT platform you all can connect with Hope with the data that you have collected. That's very, very important. So this is a beautiful picture, cartoon picture that I saw, that citizens are ready to help. So please remember, it is a supplementation of the scientific effort of a scientist. So citizen science always would go hand in hand with the scientist effort, and will cover up more areas and more, make the scientists work more effective with the help from the citizens. Thank you. Hope I have given you enough things to think over and of course discuss. So now the session is over.